John Kennedy gave Ellen a Bible. What she did will leave you speechless. The studio lights of The Ellen Show blazed with their usual warmth, casting a golden glow over the familiar set, where laughter, games, and celebrity charm had become a daily ritual for millions of viewers across America. The audience buzzed with anticipation, their applause a rhythmic wave that filled the air as Ellen DeGeneres stepped onto the stage, her trademark smile as bright as ever. Her navy blazer and crisp white sneakers were the perfect blend of polished and approachable, a look that had made her one of the most trusted faces on television. Today's guest was someone unexpected, someone whose presence carried a weight that even the seasoned talk show host couldn't fully anticipate. Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana, a man known for his sharp wit, unwavering principles, and deep-rooted faith, was about to walk onto her stage. The audience clapped louder as his name flashed across the screen, their excitement palpable. Ellen, ever the professional, waved to the crowd, her grin widening as she settled into her chair, ready to guide the interview with her signature charm. But beneath that polished exterior, there was a flicker of unease, a subtle tension that only the most observant might catch, a slight tightening of her jaw, a momentary pause in her breath. She had hosted countless politicians, actors, and musicians, but something about Kennedy felt different. His reputation preceded him, a man who spoke with the kind of plain-spoken sincerity that cut through the noise of Washington, a man whose faith wasn't just a talking point, but a guiding light. Ellen glanced at her cue cards, her fingers brushing the edges as she prepared to dive into the routine questions about his work in the Senate, his commitment to his constituents, and the values that shaped his career. The stage manager signaled and the cameras zoomed in as Senator Kennedy stepped out, his tall frame moving with a deliberate ease. He wore a simple navy suit, his tie a muted shade of red that seemed to nod to his Southern roots. His face, weathered by years of public service, broke into a warm smile as he waved to the audience, his eyes crinkling with a kindness that felt both disarming and genuine. The crowd roared, some standing to applaud, drawn to the authenticity that radiated from him. Ellen stood to greet him, extending her hand, and for a moment their eyes met. There was something in Kennedy's gaze, a quiet intensity, a knowing look that seemed to see beyond her carefully crafted persona. "Welcome, Senator Kennedy," Ellen said, her voice bright and welcoming as they both sat down. "It's such an honor to have you here. I mean, a senator from Louisiana on my little show. We're gonna have to step up our game today." The audience laughed, the tension easing for a moment, as Ellen leaned into her role as the affable host. Kennedy chuckled, his drawl soft but commanding. "Well, Ellen, I'm just a country boy trying to keep up with you city folks," he said, his humor landing perfectly with the crowd. The banter flowed easily at first, with Ellen asking about his work in Washington, his efforts to bridge divides, and the values that kept him grounded in a world of political chaos. Kennedy answered with a blend of humor and wisdom, his words laced with the kind of folksy charm that made complex issues feel human. He spoke about listening to people, about fighting for what's right, and about the importance of staying true to one's beliefs. The audience nodded along, captivated by his sincerity. But as the interview progressed, something shifted. Ellen's questions, though well-rehearsed, began to feel mechanical, as if she were going through the motions. Kennedy, however, was fully present, his eyes never leaving her face, his responses carrying a weight that seemed to linger in the air. He spoke about the power of faith, not in a preachy way, but as a quiet truth that had carried him through the storms of public life. "You know, Ellen," he said, leaning forward slightly, "there's something about believing in something bigger than yourself that keeps you steady when the world's trying to knock you down." The audience murmured in agreement, some clapping softly, But Ellen's smile faltered for just a moment, a crack in her armor that was gone as quickly as it appeared. She tilted her head, her voice light but curious. "That's beautiful, Senator. I mean, faith is such a personal thing, isn't it? How do you hold on to that in a place like Washington?" It was a safe question, one designed to keep the conversation moving, but Kennedy didn't take the bait. Instead, he paused, his hands resting calmly in his lap, and looked at her with that same piercing gaze. "It's not just about holding on to it, Ellen," he said softly. "It's about sharing it. Sometimes you gotta give it away to really understand what it means." The studio fell quiet, the audience sensing a shift in the energy. Ellen blinked, her fingers tightening around her cue cards as she tried to steer the conversation back to familiar territory. "Well, that's a great way to look at it," she said, her voice a touch too bright. "So tell us more about what's next for you in the Senate." But Kennedy raised a hand, gently interrupting her. "Hold on now, Ellen," he said, his tone kind but firm. "I brought something for you today. Something I think you might need." The audience leaned forward, their murmurs growing louder as Kennedy reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a small, worn leather Bible. Its edges were frayed, the cover softened by years of use, and it carried the weight of something sacred, something deeply personal. Ellen's eyes widened, her smile freezing in place as she stared at the book in his hands. "Oh, Senator," she said, her voice catching slightly. That's so thoughtful." She reached out to take it, her fingers brushing the warm leather, but there was a hesitancy in her movements, as if she sensed that this wasn't just a gift. It was a moment that could change everything. The camera zoomed in, capturing every flicker of emotion on Ellen's face as she held the Bible, her hands trembling just enough to betray her composure. The audience was silent now, their earlier excitement replaced by a collective holding of breath. This wasn't in the script. This wasn't the usual talk show fare of jokes and promotional plugs. Kennedy's voice softened, but it carried the same gentle authority that had made him a trusted figure in public life. "Ellen," he said, his eyes locked on hers, "this ain't just any Bible. This is mine. I've carried it with me through every tough day, every hard decision. It's got my notes, my prayers, my heart in it. And there's something else inside, something I believe you're meant to see." Ellen's breath hitched, her fingers tightening around the book as she looked at him, searching for an explanation. What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, the microphones barely catching it. Kennedy's smile was warm, almost fatherly, but there was a depth to it that made the room feel smaller, more intimate. "I mean, he said that sometimes the good Lord puts people in your path for a reason, and I think he put me here today to give you this." Ellen set the Bible down on her desk, her hands lingering on its cover as if she were afraid to let go. The audience could feel the electricity in the air, the sense that something monumental was unfolding. Even the producers in the control room hesitated, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let this unscripted moment play out. Ellen tried to laugh it off, her practiced deflection kicking in. "Well, Senator, you're full of surprises today," she said, forcing a smile. "I mean, a Bible on daytime TV." "That's a new one." The audience chuckled nervously, but Kennedy didn't laugh. He leaned forward, his voice steady and kind. "Ellen," he said, "I know what it's like to carry the weight of the world's expectations. I know what it's like to smile when your heart's breaking. And I think you know it too." The words hit her like a quiet thunderbolt. Ellen's smile wavered, her eyes glistening as she looked at him, then at the Bible, then back at him. For the first time in years, her carefully constructed mask began to slip, and the audience could see it, the vulnerability, the fear, the flicker of something real. "Why me?" she asked, her voice so soft it was almost lost in the hum of the studio lights. Kennedy's eyes filled with compassion, the kind of compassion that comes from a life shaped by faith and service. Because he said, "I believe you're carrying something heavy, something you've been holding on to for a long time. And I believe this book, and what's inside it, might help you lay it down." Ellen's hands trembled as she touched the Bible again, feeling something thick inside like an envelope. She didn't open it, not yet, but the weight of it seemed to anchor her to the moment. The audience was completely silent now, their eyes fixed on her, sensing that they were witnessing something extraordinary. Kennedy sat back, giving her space, his presence a quiet reassurance that whatever came next, she wouldn't face it alone. Ellen looked out at the crowd, her audience, the people who had laughed with her, cried with her, trusted her for nearly 2 decades. For the first time, she saw them not as fans to entertain, but as witnesses to a truth she had buried deep inside. The cameras caught every micro-expression, the flutter of her eyelids, the shallow rise and fall of her chest, the way her fingers clutched the Bible as if it were a lifeline. "I don't know what to say," she admitted, her voice cracking slightly. This is a lot." Kennedy nodded, his expression gentle, but unwavering. "You don't have to say anything right now," he said. "Just hold on to it. Let it speak to you when you're ready." The audience murmured softly, some wiping tears from their eyes, others nodding in quiet agreement. This wasn't just a talk show moment. It was something sacred, something real. Ellen looked at Kennedy, her eyes searching his face for answers, for reassurance, for something to make sense of the storm beginning to stir inside her. "How do you know?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "How do you know I need this?" Kennedy's smile was soft, almost mysterious, as he leaned forward slightly. "Because he said sometimes the good Lord whispers to us through the people he sends our way. And I'm just listening to that whisper today." The studio lights seemed to dim for a moment, or perhaps it was just the weight of the moment settling over everyone in the room. Ellen held the Bible in her lap, her fingers tracing the worn leather, her mind racing with questions she wasn't ready to ask. The audience watched in stunned silence, their applause forgotten, their attention riveted on the woman who had entertained them for years, and the senator who had just turned her world upside down with a simple gift. Kennedy sat quietly, his hands folded, his presence a steady anchor in the storm he had unwittingly unleashed. The producers in the control room exchanged glances, their hands hovering over the controls, unsure whether to let this moment continue or pull the plug before it went too far. But it was too late. Something had shifted, not just in Ellen, but in the air, in the hearts of everyone watching. This was no longer just an interview. It was the beginning of a reckoning, a moment that would ripple far beyond the walls of the studio. And as Ellen sat there clutching the Bible, she knew somewhere deep inside that whatever was inside that book, whatever was written in that envelope, was about to change everything she thought she knew about herself. If you're still here, witnessing this moment that could change everything, if you believe that some truths are worth standing up for, no matter the cost, go ahead and like this video and comment the word courage below. Let's see how many of us still believe that faith is stronger than fame. The air in the studio thickened with an unspoken tension as Ellen held the worn Bible in her hands, her fingers tracing the edges as if searching for answers in the leather itself. The audience remained hushed, their eyes darting between her and Senator John Kennedy, who sat calmly across from her, his posture relaxed, but his gaze steady and compassionate. Ellen's mind raced, a whirlwind of confusion and curiosity swirling beneath her composed exterior. She had hosted all kinds of guests, from movie stars to world leaders, but none had ever pierced through her defenses like this, with a simple gift that felt heavier than any award she had ever received. Kennedy, with his gentle Southern drawl and unyielding sincerity, seemed to embody a quiet strength that drew people in, making even the most guarded souls feel seen. Senator Ellen said, her voice softer than usual, carrying a hint of vulnerability that surprised even her. This Bible. It's beautiful, really. But why now? Why me? Kennedy leaned forward slightly, his hands clasped together, his expression one of genuine concern, mixed with the wisdom of someone who had navigated the turbulent waters of public life with faith as his compass. Ellen, he replied, his tone measured and kind. I've always believed that timing is everything, and sometimes the good Lord handles the timing better than we ever could. I didn't come here just to talk politics or share stories from the Hill. I came because I think there's something in that book that speaks directly to you. Ellen's eyes flickered down to the Bible again, feeling the subtle thickness of the envelope inside a mystery that both intrigued and terrified her. The cameras captured every nuance, the slight quiver in her lip, the way her shoulders tensed just a fraction. The audience, sensing the rawness of the moment, shifted in their seats, some leaning forward, as if to catch every word. Kennedy continued, his voice carrying the authenticity that had earned him respect across aisles in Washington. You see, Ellen faith isn't just about going to church on Sundays or quotes in verses. It's about facing the hard truths, the ones we bury deep because they're too painful to look at. I've had my share of those moments in my career, times when the pressure felt like it was crushing me, when I wondered if I was losing sight of who I really am amid all the noise. He paused, his eyes meeting hers with a depth that made her feel exposed, yet oddly safe. Ellen swallowed hard, her mind flashing back to the countless nights she had spent alone, staring at the ceiling, wondering if the applause was worth the emptiness it left behind. What kind of moments, she asked, her curiosity overriding her instinct to deflect. Kennedy smiled faintly, a smile that spoke of resilience forged through trials. Well, there was a time early in my service when I was facing a tough decision, one that could make or break things for the folks back home in Louisiana. I was up all night, wrestling with it, feeling like the weight of the world was on my shoulders. But I turned to this very Bible, flipped to a passage that reminded me that we're not meant to carry it all alone. It gave me the clarity I needed, the strength to stand firm. Faith has been my anchor, Ellen, helping me stay true when everything else tries to pull you away. The audience murmured softly, nods of agreement rippling through the crowd, as Kennedy's words resonated with a universal truth. Ellen felt a pang in her chest, a recognition of that same struggle, the exhaustion of maintaining a facade that everyone loved but left her hollow. "That's inspiring," she said, her voice cracking just a bit. "But I don't know if I have that kind of anchor anymore." Kennedy's expression softened further, his compassion evident in the way he nodded understandingly. "Maybe you do, Ellen. Maybe it's been there all along, waiting for the right moment. And speaking of moments, there's a story behind that envelope inside the Bible. It's not from me, it's from someone who knew you better than anyone." Ellen's breath caught her hands, instinctively clutching the book tighter. "What do you mean?" she whispered, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and anticipation. Kennedy took a deep breath, his voice dropping to a more intimate level, as if sharing a sacred secret. "A while back, before she passed, your mother reached out to me. She was a remarkable woman, full of love and wisdom. And she saw things in you that maybe you couldn't see yourself anymore. She gave me that letter, Ellen. Said she'd been holding on to it for years, waiting for the right person to deliver it. She believed I could be that person because of how I've spoken about faith in my own life, how it's helped me through the loneliness that comes with public service. Tears welled up in Ellen's eyes, unbidden and real, as memories of her mother flooded her mind. The woman who had supported her dreams, who had seen her through the early struggles of her career, who had always known when something was amiss. The audience gasped softly, the emotional weight of the revelation settling over the room like a blanket. Ellen's voice trembled as she spoke. "My mother, she gave it to you." But how why Kennedy's eyes glistened with empathy, his words chosen carefully to honor the trust placed in him. "She followed my work. Ellen, she admired how I try to live out my faith in everything I do, how I speak up for what's right with honesty and kindness. She thought that maybe, just maybe, I could help you remember something important. That letter, it's from you to you, written when you were young, full of hopes and fears about the path ahead." Ellen's world tilted, the studio lights blurring as tears spilled over. She had written letters to herself back then in her early 20s, pouring out her soul on paper as a way to stay grounded amid the chaos of chasing fame. But this one she had entrusted to her mother, a safeguard against losing herself completely. "I can't believe this," she murmured, her hands shaking as she felt the envelope through the pages. The audience was riveted, many wiping their own tears, touched by the vulnerability unfolding before them. Kennedy reached across the desk, his hand hovering near hers in a gesture of support, not intrusion. "Ellen, opening that letter might be scary, but it's also a chance to reconnect with the part of you that's been hiding. I've seen faith do that for people, help them face the isolation, the doubts, the burdens we all carry. In my own journey, applying those biblical principles has kept me from drifting too far, reminded me that true fulfillment comes from being authentic, not from the spotlight." Ellen nodded slowly, her defenses crumbling under the weight of his sincere words. She began to open up, her voice raw and honest. "You know, Senator, I've been so busy making everyone else happy, laughing, dancing, but inside it's been lonely, really lonely, like I'm performing for an empty room sometimes." Kennedy listened intently, his nod encouraging her to continue. "That's the secret of it, Ellen," he said gently. "Faith teaches us that we're never truly alone. It fills those empty spaces, gives us the courage to be real." The connection between them deepened, a bridge built on shared humanity and the power of belief. Ellen's tears flowed freely now, mascara streaking her cheeks, but she didn't care. The mask was slipping, and for the first time, it felt liberating. The studio crew stood frozen, the producers in the control room debating in hushed tones whether to intervene. But the moment was too powerful, too genuine to stop. Kennedy shared another glimpse into his world, how turning to Scripture during challenging times in the Senate had helped him maintain integrity and compassion, even when faced with division. "It's not about being perfect," he said, "it's about being true. And Ellen, I think that letter is your reminder of that truth." Ellen looked at him, gratitude mixing with her pain. "Thank you," she whispered, "for bringing this to me, for seeing what I couldn't." Kennedy smiled, his presence a beacon of hope in her storm. The audience erupted in soft applause, not for a performance, but for the humanity on display. This was more than television, it was a turning point, a revelation that would echo far beyond the stage. If you're still here witnessing this moment that could change everything, if you believe that some truths are worth standing up for, no matter the cost, go ahead and like this video and comment the word courage below. Let's see how many of us still believe that faith is stronger than fame. The studio lights seemed to dim under the weight of the moment, casting long shadows across the set. As Ellen's fingers hovered over the envelope, tucked inside Senator John Kennedy's Bible. Her hands trembled visibly now, the yellowed paper peeking out like a ghost from her past, ready to whisper truths she had long ignored. The audience sat in rapt silence, their eyes wide, with a mix of empathy and anticipation, while the camera zoomed in mercilessly, capturing every quiver of her lip and every tear that threatened to fall. Kennedy watched her with that steady gaze of his, the kind honed from years of navigating the complexities of public service where compassion and conviction went hand in hand. He didn't push. He simply waited his presence, a silent encouragement, embodying the quiet strength that had made him a beacon for so many in his home state and beyond. Ellen took a deep breath, her voice barely audible as she broke the seal, the wax crumbling under her touch, like the barriers she had built around her heart. "Okay," she whispered more to herself than anyone else. "Let's see what 20-year-old me had to say." The paper unfolded slowly, revealing handwriting that was unmistakably hers, youthful, looping letters filled with the raw honesty of someone on the cusp of fame, terrified of what it might cost. As Ellen's eyes scanned the first lines, her breath hitched, and she began to read aloud, her voice cracking with emotion. "Dear future Ellen," she started, the words echoing through the hushed studio. "If you're reading this, it means you've climbed the mountain, but maybe you've left pieces of yourself behind on the way up. I hope not, but if you have, remember, this success isn't worth your soul." The audience gasped softly, the letter's directness cutting through the air like a knife. Ellen paused, her eyes welling up as she continued. "You've probably got the big house, the fancy cars, the applause that never stops. But do you still laugh for real? Or is it just for the cameras? Do you cry when you're alone, or have you forgotten how because it messes up the makeup?" Tears streamed down her face, now unfiltered and real, smudging her mascara in dark rivulets that she made no effort to wipe away. Kennedy nodded subtly, his expression one of profound understanding, drawing from his own experiences where faith had been the compass guiding him through personal doubts and professional pressures. "That's powerful stuff," he said gently, his southern accent lending a soothing rhythm to his words. "Sounds like that young woman knew the traps of the spotlight all too well. And Ellen, it's okay to admit if those words ring true today." Ellen nodded, swallowing hard as she delved deeper into the letter, her voice gaining a fragile strength. "I'm writing this because I'm scared." She read, scared, that one day you'll need pills to sleep through the noise in your head. Pills to wake up and face the day, pills to feel anything at all, because the real feelings got buried under all the pretending. The confession hung in the air, a bombshell, that made the audience shift uncomfortably, many exchanging glances as they processed the raw vulnerability. Ellen's face paled, her hands shaking so violently that the paper rustled audibly. "How did I know?" she murmured, looking up at Kennedy with eyes full of disbelief and pain. "How could I have predicted this?" The emptiness, the dependence. Kennedy leaned forward, his voice calm and reassuring, infused with the wisdom of Scripture that had sustained him through his own trials. "Ellen, the Bible talks about the heart, knowing its own bitterness, like in Proverbs 14:10. That young you was tapping into something deep, a wisdom beyond her years. And now facing it head-on, that's where true healing begins. Faith tells us that admitting the truth sets us free. John 8:32. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. The audience was openly emotional now, sniffles echoing through the rows, as Ellen continued reading her words, punctuated by sobs. Don't let the world consume you, the letter urged. Remember the girl who danced in the rain, without caring who watched, who stayed up late, talking about dreams and God and what really matters. If you've forgotten her, find her again. Throw away the crutches, the validation, the substances, the masks, and come back to being human. Ellen folded the paper momentarily, pressing it to her chest, as if to absorb its message into her heart. She's right, she admitted, her voice breaking completely. I've been using pills for years now to numb the loneliness, to keep going when everything felt too heavy. 8 years, Senator. It started small, just to sleep, but then it became everything. The studio erupted in a wave of supportive murmurs, the audience clapping softly, not in celebration, but in solidarity, witnessing a transformation that felt almost sacred. Kennedy's eyes glistened with empathy, his hand extending across the desk in a gesture of support. Ellen, that's brave admitting that here and now. I've seen folks in my line of work struggle with similar burdens, the stress, the isolation. But Scripture reminds us in Psalm 34:18 that the Lord is close to the brokenhearted. You're not defined by those struggles. You're defined by the courage to face them. Ellen wiped her eyes, looking out at the audience with a newfound rawness. Her usual polished demeanor shattered, but replaced by something more authentic. This letter, it's like a mirror I didn't want to look into. It predicted the addiction, the fakeness, the way I've performed my way through life. Kennedy nodded, offering more guidance rooted in his faith. And that's the power of reflection, Ellen. Like in James 1:23-24, where it talks about not just hearing the word, but doing it, lest we forget what we look like. This letter is your reminder to act, to reclaim that genuine self. The connection between them deepened Kennedy's words, acting as a lifeline, pulling Ellen from the depths of her confession toward hope. She read the final lines aloud. If you're broken, that's okay. Broken things can be mended. Just stop pretending and start living. Love the real Ellen. Folding the letter carefully, she looked at Kennedy, gratitude etched on her face. Thank you for bringing this, for helping me see. The audience stood their applause, thunderous yet tender, affirming not her performance, but her humanity. Kennedy smiled, his presence a testament to the transformative power of faith and honesty. In that moment, Ellen felt a shift inside, a cracking open of her heart that allowed light to seep in after years of darkness. The letter had laid bare her secrets, the pills, the pretense, the profound loneliness, but in admitting them, she found a strange freedom. Kennedy's biblical insights wove through her turmoil like threads of gold, reinforcing that truth and faith could mend even the most fractured soul. The studio pulsed with collective emotion, everyone touched by the vulnerability on display. Ellen hugged the Bible close, ready to embrace the change it promised. If you're still here witnessing this moment that could change everything, if you believe that some truths are worth standing up for, no matter the cost, go ahead and like this video and comment the word courage below. Let's see how many of us still believe that faith is stronger than fame. The applause in the studio faded into a profound silence as Ellen clutched the letter from her younger self, her tears drying on her cheeks, while a newfound resolve began to spark in her eyes. Senator John Kennedy stood beside her, his hand on her shoulder, in a gesture of unwavering support. The kind of solidarity that had defined his career in public service, always standing firm for what mattered, guided by faith and integrity. Ellen looked out at the audience, their faces a mosaic of empathy and encouragement, and for the first time in years, she felt seen not for her fame, but for her humanity. "I'm going to do it," she announced, her voice steadying with each word. "I'm going to follow these instructions, starting right now. The crowd erupted in cheers, but it was a different kind of applause, not for entertainment, but for bravery, for the raw courage it took to choose change in front of the world. Kennedy nodded approvingly, his smile reflecting the quiet satisfaction of someone who had witnessed a turning point, much like the pivotal moments in his own life, where faith had led him to advocate for others with compassion and truth. As the show wrapped up, Ellen hugged Kennedy tightly, whispering a thank you that carried the weight of a life altered. He returned to his duties in Washington, carrying with him the knowledge that sometimes the most impactful service happens far from the Senate floor, in moments of personal connection that ripple outward. Hours later, away from the glaring lights and the watchful eyes of cameras, Ellen sat in her quiet home. The bustling world outside muffled by the walls that had once felt like a prison of solitude. She turned off her phone, dimmed the lights, and for the first time in 2 decades, embraced complete silence. No music, no notifications, no distractions, just her and the quiet rhythm of her own breathing. At first it was unnerving. The absence of noise amplified the thoughts she had drowned out for so long, the doubts, the regrets, the whispers of who she used to be. But as the minutes stretched into an hour, something shifted. She heard her heartbeat steady and real, a reminder that beneath the layers of performance, she was still alive, still capable of feeling without the crutch of applause or pills. Tears came again, but they were cleansing, washing away the residue of years spent pretending. In that silence, Ellen began to reconnect with herself, pondering the values that had once driven her kindness. Without expectation, joy without calculation. It was a small step, but profound, echoing the principles Kennedy lived by finding strength in stillness, drawing from faith to navigate the chaos of life. That evening, with the sun dipping below the horizon, Ellen picked up her phone not to scroll through social media or check ratings, but to dial a number she hadn't called in 15 years. Sarah, her college roommate, answered on the 3rd ring, her voice tentative at first, then warm with surprise. "Ellen, is that really you?" Ellen's words tumbled out raw and unfiltered. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. Sorry for disappearing, for letting fame pull me away, for becoming someone you wouldn't recognize." There was a pause, then Sarah's laughter mixed with tears. "I always knew the real you was in there somewhere. I've missed you." They talked for hours, reminiscing about late-night dreams and shared secrets about the unpolished versions of themselves before the world imposed its expectations. Ellen apologized for the distance, for the superficial connections that had replaced genuine ones, and in Sarah's forgiveness, she found a piece of her old self returning. It was a conversation without performance, without scripts, just 2 friends bridging the gap time had created. This act of reaching out mirrored the outreach Kennedy often emphasized in his work building bridges through honest dialogue, rooted in the belief that relationships heal when tended with care. The next morning, Ellen faced the hardest instruction, throwing away the pills. She gathered the bottles from her nightstand, their labels a stark reminder of the dependency that had crept in, silently numbing the pain but also the joy. With trembling hands, she emptied them into the trash, each pill a symbol of the crutches she no longer wanted. It wasn't easy. Withdrawal loomed like a shadow, but she felt a surge of liberation, a commitment to feeling everything, the good, the bad, the real. Later that day, she posted a simple photo on social media, the trash can with the empty bottles captioned, "Day 1 of being real." No more hiding. The response was overwhelming, millions of likes, but more importantly, messages from fans sharing their own struggles inspired by her honesty. Churches saw an uptick in visitors seeking guidance, Therapists noted calls from those ready to confront addictions, and families began mending old rifts. Kennedy, back in Louisiana, heard about it and smiled, knowing that his act of faith had sparked a chain reaction, much like how his steadfast principles influenced policy and people alike. As the days turned into weeks, Ellen's journey became a beacon for others. She stepped back from the relentless pace of showbiz, focusing on quiet acts of kindness, volunteering, reconnecting with loved ones, exploring her faith in private moments. Kennedy continued his work, advocating with the same integrity that had brought him to Ellen's stage. His story intertwining with hers as a testament to the power of authenticity. Through this experience, we learn profound lessons that faith and living true to oneself are far stronger than the fleeting allure of fame. In a world obsessed with perfection and performance, embracing vulnerability opens doors to genuine connection and healing. Consider writing a letter to your future self, capturing your core values and warnings against losing them to societal pressures. Remind yourself to prioritize mental health, to seek silence amid noise, to nurture relationships over accolades. Always approach others with compassion, as Kennedy did, recognizing that everyone carries unseen burdens. By choosing authenticity, we not only save ourselves but inspire a ripple effect of positive change, proving that the most radical act is simply being human. Faith isn't about flawlessness. It's about finding strength in brokenness, guiding us toward a life of purpose and peace. If you're still here witnessing this moment that could change everything, if you believe that some truths are worth standing up for no matter the cost, go ahead and like this video and comment the word courage below. Let's see how many of us still believe that faith is stronger than fame.